The statements expressed in the following program are those of the speaker. They do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the sponsor, the host, and/or OLAS Media.
OLAS Media.
You're listening to the Lawyer in Blue Jeans podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Lawyer in Blue Jeans podcast. My name is Justin Isaac, and this is our very first episode of the podcast. And today I am joined by James Hess, Christina Garcia, and Adam Schneider, where we're going to be talking about the law, wacky cases, anything that's really relevant to the law. We're going to be breaking down some of the crazy things that we see in the law. So we're here for your requests as well. If you see something in the news, or if you want us to talk about why your neighbor's tree is infringing on your area and who's at fault, let us know. Email me, justin@lawyer-in-bluejeans.com, and we'll be happy to talk about it on our show. So let's go around and have everyone kind of introduce themselves and give a little bit of background. So James, let's start with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm James Hess. I'm an estate planning attorney with the Lawyer in Blue Jeans. Born and raised here in San Diego. Lived here my whole life. Go Padres. I have a background in family law. That's what I worked in before becoming an estate planning attorney. And in law school, I focused on sports and entertainment law. So I have a little bit of a background in that.
All right, Christina?
Hi, Christina Garcia. I am a San Diego native as well, and graduate of California Western School of Law. I am a recent bar passer, but I've been doing estate planning, trust administrations, and probates for about 7 years now. And
you've been in our office for a couple of years too, right?
Yeah,
now?
I've been
2-3 years now.
3.
Yeah, before you even passed the bar. So we were very happy when you did, because that's we all know the struggle of passing the bar and what that entails and studying for it and all that stuff. So, all right, Adam, what about you?
Hello, everyone. My name's Adam Schneider. I unfortunately cannot claim San Diego. I was born in outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Go Pirates. Not. Totally just kidding about that. My previous background, there's a lot. I was a criminal defense practitioner and did a bunch of different areas of law. My mentor's advice was do everything and figure out all the stuff you don't like and then pick the one you want to practice forever. Since that, I've been doing estate planning, wills, trust, and probate, and I absolutely love it. And that's a little bit about me. Thank you.
So we're going to kick it off today with our most recent legal news. Lady Gaga, I think a couple of years ago, her dogs were dognapped, and she didn't know, what was going on. She wanted to put out a reward. So she put out a statement that said she would give $500,000, no questions asked, very important, to anyone who returned the dogs, found the dogs, or I think participated in getting the dogs back to her. And a woman came forward with her dogs, and she is now claiming and suing Lady Gaga, saying that she did not receive her $500,000 reward. And she's also claiming some other damages, pain and suffering, and also that Lady Gaga never had the intent to actually pay that reward. So this is a very interesting lawsuit, because the woman who came forward with the dogs actually participated in the dog napping, it appears, and she is a part of that suit, or I believe she got let off with probation. So the question becomes, should someone who actually participates in a crime which caused Lady Gaga to bring forward this $500,000 reward, should she be able to profit from something like that? What are your thoughts, James?
So my initial thought is no. If you are committing a crime in order to complete a contract, you shouldn't be able to take under that contract.
But the contract was it's a unilateral contract. All you have to do is perform in order to get that money. So if you bring the dogs to Lady Gaga, you get the money, the $500,000. It doesn't say anything about not participating or having clean hands or anything like that. All it says is, if you get my dogs back to me, I will give you $500,000. It's what's called a unilateral contract. So why doesn't that work here?
You bring up a good point about the no questions asked clause in Lady Gaga's initial offer. in the unilateral contract. But there are, I think, several challenges that can be made. One is the idea of unclean hands, which essentially says if you are committing a crime, you can be prevented from damages. I think there's also issues with just public policy and what it would do to public policy, what it would do to cases like this in the future, seeing a rise in people stealing other people's pets in order to try and get a reward out of it.
So, Christina, what are your thoughts?
I think it all depends and stems on whether or not what their intent was when they stole the dogs, because the dogs were taken and then Lady Gaga stated everywhere, posted this unilateral contract, knowing that they might have been stolen. And all she wanted to do was post the reward in order to get her dogs back. So if you knowingly say, I'm going to give $500,000, no questions asked, it's probably because you know that they were stolen and you don't care whether or not want to give the money to get your dogs no matter what. And I don't know if, there might be public policy issues where we shouldn't want that to happen, but ultimately that was what she contracted for.
Yeah, I think that if you really think about this, Lady Gaga didn't necessarily make this statement with the idea that the person who would bring the dogs forward would be the actual dog napper or participate in it. She just wanted her dogs. So when she says no questions asked, $500,000, that makes sense, right? I just want my dogs back. I will give $500,000 to, whatever happened or however that happens. And the lady who actually, she did, I think she's on probation from it, but she was definitely involved in it. And they have video of her being involved in it too, waiting for the dogs to be dropped off to her. But so it doesn't mean that she's wrong when she claims that she was supposed to get those funds. But public policy might say that, hey, maybe we shouldn't allow this to happen because that's not fair, right? Like, Adam, we have a Slayer statute, which is kind of similar to this, right? You want to tell us all about that?
Yeah, it's, think about life insurance policies and where somebody commits an illegal act in order to get money, such as killing someone. So basically you're barred from collecting that money because you committed murder. Awarding people is incentivizing people for committing bad acts. So that's what we're dealing with in this situation. She's receiving money, although she conducted illegal behavior. I think an important caveat, though, is we're talking a lot about this no questions asked thing. And Lady Gaga did receive a benefit by putting that in the contract.
Yeah.
That was the return of the dogs.
Yeah.
So she received something, and she wasn't counting on the reciprocal benefit necessarily going to the person that kidnapped her dogs. But it is what happened, and her putting that in there actually served a purpose and made sure that her dogs were returned. So why wouldn't the person get the reward for bringing back the dogs too?
Yeah, see, she's basically saying there's no condition to the return of my dogs, and there's no condition to this reward. Now, the rest of the complaint that the lady filed, she claims, emotional distress and some other and stuff like, Lady Gaga never intended to pay the reward. And I don't really know how we can come to that conclusion. But I think it's interesting because where you differentiate between this case and like a Slayer statute, a Slayer statute, if you kill somebody to inherit some kind of life insurance or retirement or something like that, it basically bars you from inheriting because obviously we don't want to incentivize murder. But when you're dealing with something like that where you just get a payout if someone dies, this is different than when someone makes a statement. Lady Gaga made a statement that said, I will give $500,000, no questions asked. And I think that's such an unequivocal statement that it's really hard to say that this lady, in my mind, it's hard to say that she shouldn't be rewarded for returning of the dogs because she fulfilled what her unilateral part of the contract was. All she had to do was perform. She performed. Shouldn't she get the money?
Yeah, and then on the other side of that, though, is that there are people in our society who do this for a living. They steal dogs and they wait to see if there are any reward flyers. And, who knows what happens to the dogs after that, if they just release them or what have you, if there's no reward. But stealing someone's dogs like Lady Gaga's, you might expect her to put out this reward. So it might have been done for that purpose, for that illegality.
But does that negate it, though?
I feel like it should because of public policy, because you don't want a bunch of people continuing to just steal dogs in order to hope for a reward, even, $100, $500, all the way up to $500,000.
But I'm not a contract attorney, and we do estate planning in our firm, so this is obviously not like what we focus on. But when we learn in contracts that there's two types of contracts where you have two people who perform, or you have one person, or what's called a unilateral contract. Well, all you have to do is perform in order to satisfy the contract, and that's what we have in this situation. But what we're going to then is really if we're talking about the individual, the lady who did this, now we're talking about her thought process before she performed. So that brings a whole different layer to unilateral contracts. And I think that it makes sense that it could be negated as a result of public policy because we don't want to incentivize that. But technically, she did perform the contract. So it's really, really tough.
Well, my kind of thoughts are this is all, the court of public opinion, of course, but Lady Gaga has the financial means to pay for this dog, presumably, as well. Mm-hmm. Her mission was complete. Why does she get to skirt the system and invalidate a contract that was arguably fulfilled? Because she put it out there and she got her dogs back. Yeah. And, that's a devil's advocate position.
Absolutely.
But would she is she going to receive preferential treatment because she's a celebrity?
Well, that brings up another point, too, is that would this be the case if it was someone who offered $1,000? Or what about, since someone was shot in this whole scenario, right? The dog walker was shot. Maybe that's why this is such a bigger issue.
And we see this all the time. I know in my neighborhood, on a certain app, I see rewards for animals posted and the no questions asked doctrine. And you're right, Justin, it is for a lower of amount, so nobody ever really pokes these things. But here we are, a much bigger case with a lot more money involved in physical harm or robbery of someone.
And because she had the financial means, though, it could be why she was targeted.
Yeah.
I guess my whole issue with it is the doctrine of a contract. It's a contract for goods, essentially, right?
Okay.
That are stolen. And if somebody were to steal property from somebody and sell that stolen property to somebody else, that contract is voidable, right?
Okay.
If the person from which the property or the assets or whatever were stolen can prove that they have superior title to the person that they were sold to, it's the idea of replevin and being able to essentially void that contract for the sale of stolen goods.
So but that's more like what you're talking about is in like a pawn shop or some other stolen.
A pawn shop or somebody robs a house and turns around and sells the products they stole on Craigslist or whatever,
But those situations I think are a lot harder because then you have a party who innocently purchased stolen goods, and then how do they get their money back? What if the thieves, sold something and then spent all the money? Then the person who thought that they were buying a legitimate thing, now they're just kind of screwed.
I mean, it sucks for them, but at the end of the day, the contract for stolen goods is voided.
Yeah.
I mean, bringing it back to the dogs, if the dogs are stolen and they're rightfully Lady Gaga's, she can take them back and you don't have to pay to get something that's already yours back that was illegally stolen.
Yeah, but she's not paying for them back. She's not buying these dogs on Craigslist, right? She's not buying them on the open market. She made a plea to the public in many different places on social media, I believe, and like TMZ and whatnot. And so she wasn't saying, I will buy my dogs back. She was saying, if anyone can return my dogs or lead to the return of my dogs, I will give you $500,000 as a reward. So I think, yes, while it does deal with stolen goods, I guess dogs are a good in one way or another because it's not a service. So I still think that it comes back to this question as did she fulfill the contract, and does the criminal party in this sense, is she not entitled to that money because she participated in or set up this whole situation to begin with? So that's what it comes down to, is that I think the public policy argument against this is going to be your probably your strongest suit, but ultimately it's a very interesting lawsuit overall.
It would be a fun one to watch in a jury trial.
Yeah, if they, I wish they would, after watching Johnny Depp Amber Heard, case, I think that was the best, I guess, live action drama that we've had in a very long time. And because those attorneys, some were great and some were horrific.
Some were not.
And that's what made it so interesting too, because we got to sit back and talk about it at the office and analyze it on the side, saying like, "This, did you see this? Did you hear this?" Because it brings up a window into the court that we don't get to see that often, and especially the common public who's not an attorney definitely doesn't get to see very often.
The number of people that became legal experts after that was amazing.
It's like whenever there's a big boxing match, I remember like a big heavyweight fight, there's always going to be, you hear like all these people who are acting like they're experts. I know boxing isn't as popular as it used to be, but it's the same thing in situations like this. You get a big case such as this that everyone thinks that they know, and even as attorneys, we don't know everything, right?
We're estate planning attorneys. We don't even know anything about the Lady Gaga, the dog situation. We just think it's interesting.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. It's something that anything law related or crazy laws kind of interest me. So let's go on to a different one. Let's talk about Brett Favre.
Okay.
Brett Favre is suing Shannon Sharpe and some other people too for defamation. James, you want to kind of break that one down?
Yeah, so if you don't know what's going on with Brett Favre, allegedly, have to say allegedly here, there were some funds from Mississippi that were misappropriated, and these funds were part of the welfare program in Mississippi, and somehow these funds ended up, again, allegedly going to, I believe it was a school that his daughter was playing volleyball at to build a new stadium or upgrade the arena or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And obviously, court of public opinion, lots of people have had several different opinions on this about Brett Favre and what's going on. Notably, Shannon Sharpe, former NFL player, and Pat McAfee, another former NFL player, who have their own shows and podcasts and whatnot, have talked about this and used language such as stealing money from people that needed it, calling Brett Favre a thief, saying he's stealing money from poor people in Mississippi. And now they are being sued for defamation, along with a few other people, by Brett Favre. And it comes down to really fact versus opinion, in my opinion. In order to sue somebody for defamation, you have to present something as fact and it be false, and it caused them damages. And, Sharpe and McAfee are saying they were just expressing their opinion on Brett Favre. They were just expressing their opinion on the situation. They weren't actually presenting anything as fact.
Yeah. Adam, do you want to chime in?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about the case, but it sounds like there's going to have to be a lot of work to be done to prove, like you said, what actually happened in the underlying case. So I think we'll have a high delay here on the defamation suit, which oftentimes those cases are put in hold while the underlying case is taken care of.
Well, at the time, he's not currently facing criminal charges. He is being sued by the state, it looks like, to recoup funds. I think I saw that somewhere. And he has repaid over $1 million already. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is just a scandal in general because of his name and because it's supposed to go to welfare recipients. But using these funds for something like a new volleyball arena at the University of Southern Mississippi is just ridiculous when you know what they're supposed to be intended for. But when they came out and said that he quote unquote stole money from people that really needed it, that sounds like a statement to me. That doesn't sound like an opinion. If you use qualifiers that say like allegedly or in my opinion, and then make that statement, that's a little bit different. But it doesn't appear. I mean, they might have said allegedly at one point, but I don't think that they said it enough, because that suit appears to be going forward. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know too much about this matter, but I also wonder, what Brett Favre's status as a political figure and public figure as far as the defamation goes.
Why is that important?
Were the statements intended to hurt his career and to, purposefully
harm him?
Were they done with malice? Yeah.
Well, I guess let's explain why that's important, because a lot of people don't know that there's a different level for lawsuits here for defamation cases. Yeah,
so in defamation, the standard is different for when it's a public figure. With somebody in the limelight, there's different elements that need to be met, and one of them is whether or not it was, the truth of the matter, and also if it was done with malice, right? It's been a while since
it's like intent, I believe.
Actual malice.
Actual malice, yeah.
I think another important point about this is, as lawyers, we know how important it is to actually establish your damages. Arguably, Brett Favre has done a considerable amount of damage to his career, specifically during and after the Vikings fiasco. But he's going to have to show that he had losses additionally as a result of the statements that were made by these people, which could be tough to prove.
That I think so too, because if it's already in the news as a potential scandal, what more harm does someone making that statement come out? What does that actually do? So that's probably an argument that they're going to have as a defense, or at least a mitigator to damages.
That's one of the arguments that I've seen raised, is that his reputation has been just trashed so much already from everything that's going on, that these statements can't really hurt him any more than he's already been hurt.
True.
Yeah. But Adam brought up a good point about there's still a lot of information that has to come out, and this is one of the defenses that McAfee is going to use, is that in the statements that he was making on his show, he did bring up the point that there's still a lot of information that hasn't come out.
Yeah.
He made it clear that what he was saying was based on what's known so far in the public. And, he made it clear that things could change and opinions could change, because there's still a lot of information that's going to come out. And so I think that's something that will help his case, because in my opinion, he made it clear enough, what he was saying is based on what's known right now, and
that it might not be that he knows personal knowledge.
Yeah, right. As Brett Favre makes his case and more information comes out, things could change.
So do you think that this is more of a situation where he's just trying to bring a lawsuit to save face because he doesn't like what people are saying? Because that's entirely possible, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's something that I think he probably realizes the damage that his reputation has taken from this scandal, as you put it, and he's trying to do something to save face a little bit.
Makes sense.
I think it's interesting if you look at the statements, or specifically the payments. Somebody mentioned that Brett Favre has made some arguable culpability. It's not an admission of guilt per se, but it
doesn't look good though.
It's significant because it shows that maybe he does agree it's a form of settlement, that he did something wrong for some reason. So if I was McAfee or Sharp, I would also, their lawyers, be focusing in on that to show that why would you make a payment if you didn't arguably take advantage of people?
True. And the interesting thing is that this is all happening in the middle of this quote unquote scandal unfolding. So I think we kind of need the scandal to fully unfold until we can know whether or not this is defamatory or this isn't at all.
Right.
So, Adam, let's talk about this case that you found recently. Or
Yeah,
this, this theory, I guess. It's more of a theory, right?
Oh, it's very, very much a theory. Chat GP, of course, everybody's talking about it, and the algorithms and robots basically drafting things for you or analyzing even the legal sense. There was a big talk about a program actually drafting a legal opinion and then potentially arguing it in court. But we're not here to talk about that. It's the implications really of outside of that, using these systems to hire or fire employees. It kind of gets into a civil rights issue as well. But there's an entire body of case law addressing whether certain conduct by an employer, and we're talking about state and federal, constitutes unlawful discrimination against potential employees based upon certain criteria. So what we have is our systems that are being used. I think it's pretty common knowledge to screen employees during the hiring process. And you have AI technology that is doing this with algorithms to determine whether or not some people are good candidates or not. From a civil rights or employment defense lawyer's position, there's concern that these systems may be analyzing people in a way that could apply false metrics in the sense that the program could be racist or it could be biased to make sure a certain class of people is not hired based upon the computer's model. So it's very breaking. This is an article that was just published today, kind of exploring the implications and the dangers of this. And Justin was right. Nobody really knows, but it's something that people are planning on having a field day in court. We were talking earlier that it might actually be easy to show that a computer program targeted a certain class of people.
I think that it would be easy if you had someone who's claiming, some kind of discrimination. I think it's a lot easier to show that a computer discriminated than a human, because the computer, in theory, is going to spit out the same or similar results every time you give the same or similar parameters. Whereas with the human, they can easily, obfuscate their thoughts, beliefs, feelings, opinions. But a computer can't, right? And even if it is AI, I don't think we're at that level yet where they're able to know that they did something wrong and hide that. So the legality is, is the employer still liable even if they didn't know that the AI equipment was going to commit this crime? You can't really arrest the computer,
Right.
But you can find the employer, right? So are they still liable for something like that?
I would think so. I think that they need to do their due diligence in picking the software that they use and how they screen employees and candidates to hire. And if they're not doing their due diligence, and or even if they are doing their due diligence and they just, we need to do better at making sure that things like this don't happen.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
And
not hard to go through the stuff yourself.
well, there's a really quite historic saying in criminal law. It's ignorance of the law is not a valid defense in the criminal spectrum. But in this sense, the article I have here puts in here, ignorance of the flaws in the system is not likely to be a valid defense for the employer. So
Yeah. How would, I don't know how to read code. So how would we know if there's something completely wrong there,
Yeah.
But as the AI system is an agent of you, it is acting with agency on your behalf. You're still responsible if someone who is working under you commits a crime. To a certain extent, you are. If they committed some kind of crime or some kind of violation, what's the ultimate liability there?
and it's still very much up in the air.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
all opinion, of course. The other thing I read in this article was proving that the system actually took actions, and you can actually show that there was a disparate impact on a class of people which is kind of the legal precipice that's all rest on. It's not likely to come up if one or two people are harmed, but you can bet that it's going to garner attention if hundreds of people from the same demographics or class bring up this issue. So right then and there, you are dealing with potentially a big class action lawsuit that could roll down in the coming years.
True.
Now, is this all hypothetical, or do we have some sort of instances with the technology pulling out these biases?
It seems very hypothetical to me at this point.
I think there's actually stuff going through the court system right now regarding Fair Housing Act and AI and people using AI to screen applicants for housing. Essentially the same idea that these algorithms are having implicit bias on certain types of candidates. So
And
it'll be interesting to see.
How do you get that out? I mean, we need a computer scientist to really break that down. I know that there was someone, a black couple recently was awarded a big a settlement, I think yesterday or a couple of days ago, for a couple $1 million because when they listed it and they were the sellers, the values coming in were like substantially less than when they had their white friends sell it or act like they were the sellers. I don't know who they sued. I just saw like the headline for that case, but it might be something along those lines where there's some kind of implicit bias. And with AI, it's so hard because it is going to be something where we're going to have some case law on this eventually. And it's going to come down to, I think that we're, as a business owner, you're going to need to really vet that program. But then again, is it really cost efficient to even have that program if you have to vet it, if you have to find out whether or not there's some issues with it? And so then it just kind of negates the need for it.
Well, I think I've kind of played around with having it pull up a contractual analysis of something. And what's interesting to me is if you have the computer program to screen people, I think there's always the argument that you meet with the people face to face in person. So whatever kind of bias that computer might have, shown you, you're still eliminating potential problems, and it's still going to require some kind of human interaction as a quality control check. Like Justin said, we're not there to fully rely on these systems. And the question is, will we ever be really?
Yeah, and I think it depends on how much leeway you're giving to the technology. If you're just having the AI go through the resumes and make sure, like, okay, we want a candidate who has this much experience, who's got these degrees, these qualifications. Other than that, we're not going to look at it. Or we might pull a couple later, and then after the AI narrows it down to the actual qualifications you're looking for, then you bring people in, and it. Hopefully it shouldn't have that bias in just those parameters. Yeah. But when you extend those parameters to just AI figure it out, that's when we run into, well, what are they figuring out?
So maybe just more of a screening type.
I mean, AI theoretically could be used to eliminate bias. Yeah. If you're just supposedly saying looking at certain parameters,
but it's still programmed by humans.
But right.
Right, so that's how do you fully eliminate that? Now we're getting into like a philosophical question. That's interesting. I think that's something to watch out for because as we go in the next few years, the way AI is blowing up right now, we're going to see a lot of stuff coming through, lawsuits coming through, cases coming through. There's going to be a lot of crazy stuff, and I guess let's stay on one other media-related issue, which is. Seattle School District sues social media companies. I know, James, you brought this one up and you've already done some talking, but why don't you kind of give a brief overview of what this is?
Yeah, so this is a case currently in the U.S. District Court in the Western District of Washington in Seattle. And it's a lawsuit filed by one of the school districts up there against Meta platforms, also known as Facebook, Google, YouTube, TikTok, several other social media platforms. And essentially the idea behind the lawsuit is that these social media platforms are creating a public nuisance and harming children. The complaint calls for relief and order that the conduct constitutes a public nuisance, that the defendants are liable, that the defendants are required to are enjoined from engaging in further action, equitable relief.
So what this comes down to, from what I read, and I started reading the lawsuit. I don't know if other people do this, but as soon as I find the actual lawsuit, I kind of want to skim through it to see what it, because some of these articles don't necessarily give you the full details, but essentially they're alleging that there's the whole goal of Facebook or TikTok or whatever it might be is to quote unquote exploit the psychology and neurophysiology of their users into spending more and more time on their platforms. And that obviously can be very detrimental. There's a lot of studies that are coming out that are saying how detrimental that could be. But really, what it comes down to is, are these companies liable for putting out a legitimate, good product that isn't illegal? Would this lawsuit even be able to stop kids from using it? Like, does that even make sense?
I think it depends on the algorithms, because they've already been sued, and there have been studies that showed that they were messing with us for a while there, where on some people's algorithm feed, they were showing flowers and happy media, and seeing what if their posts changed to also be happy. And then on the opposite side of that, they were just feeding people negative things and seeing if they could be like start changing what they were typing. And so we're being used as human guinea pigs at that point. This was a couple of years ago. And so I guess you could say, like, they're not messing with us like that anymore, but ultimately the systems were I don't know if they are or not. But the systems are designed to keep us engaged, more like gambling. The newsfeed was designed by someone who also designed some of the slot machines.
Yeah.
So it's keeping us engaged and refreshed, and just that constant need to win, even though you're not putting in money, could have a detriment. And
yeah, but a lot of things could have a detriment. But really, should we? No one's being forced to use these. These are all voluntary systems. I know that they're kids, so it's a little bit different. Kids, they can't make the same decisions in most things nowadays. So I guess, like, my question would be, can we really come up with a lawsuit that's going to prohibit these companies from targeting minors? And is that even legal in the first place?
I mean, honestly, I feel like we just need to do a better job educating our children on what social media actually is. When they're seeing their friends posting all of these fun photos and they start to feel depressed that they're not being involved and they're being left out, you're only posting part of your life. It's not black and white,
Yeah. But I guess the question is, these companies, they have a responsibility to a certain extent, right? That's why most of these companies have an age requirement. You need to be at least 12. You can't be a 6-year-old creating a TikTok or Facebook or what. I don't even know what the age restrictions are, but I know that some companies have a minimum age, so they are aware that there is some kind of responsibility there. But really, though, can we legally say to these companies, you can't go after this target demo? You can't go after these type of people?
Well, Justin, you brought up a good point about the freedom of choice, if you will, between adults and kids. What's interesting in this perspective, if I was going to play devil's advocate again and was working for Facebook or whatever big company it is, I'd push it back onto the parents.
Yeah.
Did you allow your child to have access to a phone or a laptop or an iPad? I think that's an interesting perspective too, because even though the kids might not be able to have free will like an adult, the adult is still putting these mechanisms into their hands.
Yeah.
And then they're availing themselves of the programs. So I think that could be an important point as well.
I think one of the things about this, though, is that you have a situation where, say, like the tobacco company, there's demonstrable effects from smoking tobacco. Now, there might not be demonstrable effects necessarily from overusing social media, but maybe there is. And then we get to that point where, well, can we limit what social media is allowed to do with children, just like we did with alcohol commercials, tobacco? Someone on one of these articles made a good point, or a couple of different good points that are kind of the opposite of each other. One said, well, with the opioid crisis, what do? We stop the flood of opioids out there, meaning like stop the social media companies, right? And then another person said, well, casinos aren't necessarily held liable for gambling addicts, so why should social media companies? So those are two opposite viewpoints, and I think that they both kind of are right, except for we're dealing with children, a very vulnerable population. So it's a little bit different than both of those examples because of their ability to be influenced, especially in that age range. So maybe they should be held to a different standard.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's hard, talking about children in their mental health and their mental state, because we still don't know a lot about how our brains are developing at what age and what's going to affect us in the future,
or what the effects of social media will be long term.
Yeah,
because we don't know, because it's still a relatively new thing. So I think we need more information in order to know the long term effects of overuse of social media, and then that's very subjective too. What is overuse? How much is too much?
Might be dating myself, but I don't know if you guys remember Facebook when it first came out. You had to have a college email address in order to sign up. And now I'm looking at the complaint right now from this lawsuit, and it says 90% of children ages 13 to 17 use social media. One study reported 38% of children ages 8 to 12 use social media in 2021. And as high as 49% of children ages 10 to 12 use social media, and 32% of children ages 7 to 9. So,
wow.
I mean, there's definitely a large amount of children that are using these platforms, but like you said, assuming they all have minimum ages that you're supposed to be to sign up. Now, what kind of checks and balances they're using for that, I don't know. But
so it's interesting, because if you think about one of the solutions being, let's set a timer to it or something like that. And so now you're telling a private business, or a public business, I guess you could say, because they're publicly traded, most of them. You're telling a business how to restrict part of their major use in data. Like the majority of their usage is from minors, I'd imagine. So you're severely limiting that, and then the ad revenue, it's going to be so detrimental to their business. So they have to find a way to squash this lawsuit. I can't imagine that there's any good that would come out of this in any way. So,
well, I think the only good would be just building a bigger discussion on mental health. That's it.
Bringing that into the conversation. Yeah, I think I forgot what the Netflix show. What was that? The Netflix show about? Netflix documentary about social media.
Oh yeah.
Social Dilemma. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And that was a really good documentary, especially since one of the guys was from, I think, Instagram or one of the major social media companies, talking about how they are trying to target, they are trying to create a better algorithm that's going to keep you involved, keep you constantly paying attention. So that's going to be an interesting lawsuit as well too. All these things are coming up that we're going to have to keep on top of.
Shortening our attention spans.
Right. Yeah. Whenever my phone tells me like how much I looked at my phone the week before, it makes me just go nuts, because I'm like, how did I look at my phone for so much each day?
Yeah.
But you don't even have TikTok.
No, I don't. Absolutely not. I've heard way too many bad things about TikTok and how they, steal your data. They can monitor your keystrokes and your passwords and your credit cards and phone number. Like, they steal all your data, from what I've been told. And I want nothing to do with that. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on our first episode of the Lawyer in Blue Jeans podcast. Today, we talked about the Brett Favre defamation case. We talked about whether Lady Gaga should have to pay $500,000 to the lady who returned her dogs, who actually participated in the dog napping, and AI culpability, whether or not the employer who employs these AI systems are responsible if they do something that might have violated some kind of law or code. And the last thing we talked about was a Seattle school district suing social media companies and saying that they are a detriment to students, and whether or not that would actually hold up, and what responsibility these social media companies have to minors. Thank you, James and Christina and Adam. We've had some pretty good topics out there, and we're going to be talking about some more interesting things coming up in the future. So this has been the Lawyer in Blue Jeans podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Take a break from the news and join us at Lawyer in Blue Jeans. If you're curious about the latest wacky cases or have a specific legal inquiry, drop us an email at justin@lawyerinbluejeans.com. Follow us and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes.
Olas Media.